On today's show, Elite Prospects has put out their list of the top Senators hopefuls. We'll get into it with Sebastian High, who not only works for Elite Prospects, but our colleague with Locked On NHL Prospects.
And we continue with our organizational value rankings with players ranked 58 to 54.
This is Brady Kachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today is Wednesday, September 3rd, and Pillsy, another list, but I didn't get mad at it when I read Elite Prospects' very thorough breakdown on not the top 5, not the top 10, the top 21 prospects in the system right now.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, Ross, nobody puts more work and words into anything they do than Elite Prospects. If you disagree, just download their draft guide. It is insane. The knowledge that this team has and is able to put together is unmatched, in my opinion. And we're lucky to have a guy like Sebastian High, who is joining our show and is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Check out Locked On NHL Prospects as well. But we get into I think we mentioned almost every single guy on the 21 named list here.
So let's get to it, and then we'll come back and do our organizational value rankings. We're still in the final tier. We started yesterday or on Monday's show, so you can go and get that wherever you get your podcast. Please like and subscribe. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen here. We're going back to 5 days a week, oh so soon. So stay tuned and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. All right, here's our chat with Elite Prospect scout Sebastian High. All right, pleased to welcome back to Locked On Senators, our colleague from over at Locked On NHL Prospects. You can also find his great work with Elite Prospects. It is Sebastian High. Welcome back to the show. How's it going, man?
Thanks so much for having me back on. It's a pleasure to be here and chat about all the prospects now in the pool that my memory has been very refreshed over the course of the last month since we last spoke. And like the prospect pool rankings are going out at Elite Prospects, which has been like a massive amount of work, but really, really fun to kind of really delve into some of the more like depth players too in terms of like the prospects who don't get the spotlight quite as often in public discourse.
Seb, it's your third time on the show this summer, and it's been a perfect build-up. First, it was the mock draft, what could happen. Then we have you on after the draft, discuss what did happen, and now that the dust is settled, as you alluded to, on an EP rink side, Elite Prospects has the top 21 prospects in the Senator system right now with write-ups and links to other articles that they've done in the past covering these players, so it's definitely worth going to check out there. First thing we noticed, though, is that Logan Hensler was not at number 1, despite you coming on here in July and saying that to you, he's a better prospect than Carter Yakimchuk. What was the discussion like in the war room deciding how the 1-2 order was going to go?
In the end, this was also decided actually a little bit out of my hands because an article that came out before the entire series here, Prospect Pool Rankings, was the collective top 100 prospects article at Elite Prospects league-wide. And in that article, Yakimchuk ended up like 10 spots over Hensler. We got to stay consistent. We can't just be saying different takes every 2 weeks here. So in the end, we did stick with Yakimchuk at 1. And in terms of the tools, right, it makes sense. This is the player that has that like big boom potential on the offensive side. Personally, again, I put together this article, but I didn't like write the entire thing. Like, each one of these is a collective piece of work. Each profile is written by a different scout. Because it is a team thing, I can't just co-opt the entire article for my own personal agenda. So gotta take a step back, be happy with just having Hensler right there in that same discussion. What I will say very clearly, whether or not you think that Yakimchuk or Hensler are the superior prospect, I think it's very clear that in terms of skaters in the Senators prospect pool, these two are a cut and a half above the rest. Like, if you include goaltenders, I think Leevi Merilainen is also right in that, like, half tier below them, perhaps, conversation. I think he's a fantastic goaltender who is going to be ready to step in for NHL minutes very, very soon. But in terms of skaters, guys like Blake Montgomery are awesome, but no one else brings the type of upside and projectability that you see with Yakimchuk and Hensler. So got to be happy with having the two there at 1 and 2 respectively. But I think it's pretty cool to have like both of your top prospects be a very, very valuable resource league-wide in terms of big right shot defensemen who can move pretty well.
Yeah, and they both bring different dynamics to their game. So you kind of cover all your bases there with right shot defensemen. Now, you got 21 prospects listed here, and for everyone listening, watching, go check out all the work that Elite Prospect does on even just not the Sens prospect pools. It's cool to see other teams and how they end up. The Sens finishing at 23 overall here, but I think it's important and you already got into this a little bit, but it's important to look at prospect rankings in forms of tiers, because obviously Carter Yakimchuk and Dmitry Asayev, sure, they're on the same list, but those two are not the same. So
no,
you kind of already started your tiers. I assume Yakimchuk and Hensler are kind of on a tier on their own. Like, take us through the list we have and where you're setting tier standards.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that at that top of end of the list, you do have Yakimchuk and Hensler just a cut above the other players on this board. I do think that Leevi Merilainen, as I was mentioning, is the closest player to making that jump to that next tier. But he's also on the older side in terms of our prospect rankings here at 24 years of age. And I think that even though he's a very interesting prospect, he doesn't quite have that boom potential quite to the same extent as the two younger defensemen there. And then in that same range, you've got Blake Montgomery and Javon Moore, two guys that have a lot of physical tools, a lot of upside. Montgomery just blew up with the London Knights, and Javon Moore didn't produce at the highest level this previous season, but he was one of the best offensive drivers in the USHL. So I think that's kind of what the top 5 was very clear for us, that those were the grouping of 2 and then 3 players respectively that we wanted to have in that range. And then you kind of get into the glut, right? So I would say that there's perhaps 2 more tiers from this stage, between 6 and 11, from Lucas Beckman to Lucas Ellinas. So we'll delve into each ranking, I'm sure, over the course of the episode here. And then as well, from 12 all the way down to 21, with players like Tyler Boucher and Donovan Sabrango. And at the very tail end, the ever interesting case of Dmitry Isayev.
So I find that fascinating for a number of reasons, but the one I want to focus in on is for me, I've got Lucas Beckman and Halliday in the cut above, let's say, where you put Montgomery and Moore. What was the hesitation to move Stephen Halliday up the rankings? Because we just saw him lead the Belleville Senators in scoring as a rookie in the professional ranks. It just feels like from being passed over in drafts to being a mid-round pick, and then coming out of college, it feels like a lot of outlets, they're not sold on Stephen Halliday despite every level proving that he can score.
That he can score for sure. I mean, I think there's a little bit of hesitation because of precisely how a couple things that are really, really key to the AHL to NHL jump will affect his game. First and foremost, he is a below average skater, both in terms of generating speed, also being like agile and evasive and avoiding contact in general. Secondly, he's a very big man. He doesn't use his physicality proactively, really. This isn't a guy who's able to bully at the net front or lower the shoulder and drive the net and just force play to the middle of the ice. More often than we wanted to see last year with Belleville Senators, he was forced to the perimeter. And he was doing some quite nice things around there. He's a very skilled passer. He's a very skilled puck handler. And the highlight reel looked really, really impressive for Stephen Halliday last season. But there were also many games where it was just kind of like waves up against a cliff, where he was just trying to do something from the outside and just wasn't really able to do anything incisive. And these are some of the elements that I think we were having questions about, as well as that pace element on puck. He likes to slow the game down. The NHL is always going to force him to speed up more. And because he doesn't have the skating to compensate with that, there's just a couple of these questions, I think, with how he's going to make that final jump. But he's a really interesting prospect. I just think that it's perhaps less a thing of us being low on Stephen Halliday or Lucas Beckman. We really just like a lot, like Blake Montgomery and Javon Moore. It's more that we're high on those prospects rather than we're low necessarily on Stephen Halliday.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, how much weight gets put into positions for players? Like you look at, everybody talks about, oh, right-hand shot defensemen. Those are high value in the draft. That's pretty much the only way you can get them. Centerman, maybe he's a center now, but should he be playing the wing? Goalies, usually they take longer to find their true potential. Like, how much does a guy's position weigh into how you evaluate him and where his value could be?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think that sometimes position can be a bit of a tiebreaker for us. It's not a thing that we're like trying to rank all the centers or all the right Ds higher, and because they have this intrinsic value. It's more a thing of like if we're really at like a coin toss point between two players and one of them's a winger and one of them's maybe like a big right D, we might give that step forward to the defenseman or to the centerman in that kind of case. But when there's ever a clear like on the ice difference between two players, we tend to just go with that. We prefer to have a game breaking winger rather than like a solid play connecting center that can do a lot of things well but nothing exceptionally, right? So I think a lot of it is kind of situational. With the Senators ranking specifically, I think an area that I had to reflect about in terms of the ranking and the way that position played in was in terms of like where the organizational depth lies with the Ottawa Senators. There's a lot of right shot defensemen at this stage in the Sens prospect pool, and you got to ask yourself, how is the presence of players like Logan Hensler and Carter Yakimchuk going to influence the ability to crack the lineup and push his development trajectory for a guy like Hoyt Stanley, for instance, right? Who's another big right shot defenseman. He moves really well. He's physically involved. There's a lot to like in this player's profile, and he ended up at 8th on these rankings. And I think that there were arguments for him as high as like 6th on this board. He's a really interesting guy, but he's going to have to leapfrog first round picks in order to really get substantial minutes unless he is able to get his foot in the door first. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Carter Yakimchuk has that inside track to play pro hockey this season, get us it kind of like that head start as well. So I think that's something that maybe like we took into consideration and they did rank a player like Stephen Halliday above Hoyt Stanley because he has a much more linear track to playing substantial NHL minutes in the Ottawa Senators organization.
Hope you're enjoying our chat with Seb. We'll get right back to it. But first, Pilsy's got a word from one of our favorite sponsors.
Yes, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether you're talking about 401ks, retirement savings, properties, investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Let Monarch do the heavy lifting for you. Link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Do you have subscriptions you forgot you're paying for? Don't do that. Link all your accounts to Monarch and immediately spot subscriptions you aren't even using. Cancel those and save money every single month. Monarch also makes it simple to review your finances with your partner. You can both see budgets, goals, and spending activities in one place. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. Again, guys, that's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. It's our pub in the heart of the Glebe. Check them out at 779 Bank Street. Local beauties putting on a great time. They've got something almost every night of the week at the pub where the vibes are free. You already know that. And what better way to get the vibes going than wing night every Monday? It's actually all day and all night. Then on Tuesdays, they've got trivia night. Bring your crew and put that knowledge to the test. Wednesdays, it's open mic night. So whether you play, sing, or just want to kick back and listen, it's a great way to get over the hump. Thursdays are all about cheap tacos. And of course, Saturday night, it's all right for live music with no cover ever. And the CFL season is ongoing, just steps from Lansdowne. You can go to the GLEBE Central Pub before or after any Ottawa Red Blacks game, like this upcoming Friday when the Red Blacks host the BC Lions at 7:30. There's always something going on. Catch the big game and get down to the place where the vibes are free. That's the GCP. Visit them at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. Well, maybe Hoyt can just mention he was the first selection of his draft class because Ottawa didn't have a first, second, or third round pick in 2023. Who would you say has the most likelihood to be a breakout candidate on this year's list? Because last year, I think now with 2020 hindsight, you could say Levi Merrilainen and Blake Montgomery elevated their stock the most with the way they played. Is there a guy on this list who, whether it's circumstances and where they're playing or just you think they're ready to pop, who could be that guy this year?
I'm gonna put forth two names. I think that first and foremost, just a very, I think, just fan favorite already in in the Sens organization, Jabril Toure. I really like this player. He's big. He moves well. I mean, 6'7", 203. He's a big customer, and I just thought he looked so solid every single time I watched him play hockey this past year, either in the ECHL or in the AHL as well for 36 games last season. I think he's a guy that if he's able to maybe work a little bit more on the on-puck game, like the handling, the passing, definitely need a little bit more refining. But I think he's a guy that could just be a really fun, like sixth defenseman at some point in the NHL. And if he's able to maybe compete with Yakimchuk for minutes by offering a kind of like the foil to Yakimchuk, right? Where Yakimchuk is all event, Toure just kills plays. He's a low event style of player. I think he's a guy that could maybe rise up the rankings a little bit. In terms of like a candidate who could really pop, I would say Blake Vanek would be an interesting one. If maybe three things go right for him this season, the point totals could be awesome here in the WHL this season with the Wenatchee Wild. Like, this is a very skilled power forward, got good hands, a really heavy shot, and on top of that, I also think that he's a player that could thrive in more of a CHL type of system rather than USHL, because he is very raw. He's still quite immature. I think the added structure that you do find in the CHL could be quite helpful to just like refine his habits a little bit. But the skating needs work, the pace needs work, the decision making needs work. A lot of things would have to go right, I think. But if all of it kind of lines up, he could certainly just like explode in terms of point tally this season. But it's just as possible that he's like a half point a game guy as a D+1.
Sebastian, always appreciate your time, man. Final one for me as you're going through the tape and learning about the Sens prospect pool. Who's your favorite to cover? You can give me as many as three names.
I mean, I gotta rep my boy Logan Hensler here, considering I came on the show last time just pumping his tires. I gotta rep him. Like, he's a player I just gained so much respect for over the course of his draft eligible campaign, from being a very boring low event guy in the first half of the season to really coming out of his shell in suboptimal conditions with the University of Wisconsin. That's not the system or program that I would encourage players to go to if I were a player agent, for instance. But still, even in that environment, Hensler was becoming a really confident offensive quarterback at even strength and on the power play by year's end. And I think he's a guy that has a lot more offensive upside than 12 points in 32 games might indicate in terms of draft year production. He's a player that brings really, elite level skating, physicality that's basically at that same level as well. Not in terms of like, I'm going to kill you with a hit, but just I'm going to completely neutralize you and make sure that you are taken out of this game completely. He's a really good matchup player. He can shut individual players down low in the defensive zone. I think that the defensive upside is super exciting with Logan Hensler. And then that, again, there's a lot of offensive runway as well to further improve. So he's a player I think that could really, really explode here this upcoming season. Next, I would have to, let's give a shout out to Lucas Beckman. We already mentioned him a couple times here so far this episode, but he's a player that I think really impressed a lot of our scouts throughout the draft cycle, but also as we were going back to watching all the goaltenders in our goalie rankings league-wide, where he finished as the 19th best goaltender in the entire NHL in terms of prospect pool. So I think that's certainly telling for a player who was just drafted 97th overall. He like completely stole the starting position this year with Bacomo, put up a .914 save percentage. Just a really, really refined and solid goaltender. The footwork, the tracking skill, he's just dialed in, which is something that I just respect a bunch. And let's talk about Bruno Edin then, right? Like we already mentioned him there as well. I think that with him, you get a player that is just such a fun story, first and foremost. He was the first ever Croatian-born player to be drafted into the NHL. So already you have a story there. But beyond that, I think that because he was developing for a lot of his youth in Croatia, he's a couple years behind the curve in terms of like the refinement of a lot of his abilities. So like skating and stamina, conditioning, these elements definitely still need some work with Bruno, which also meant that by the time that the playoffs came around, he was gassed and he was getting like fourth line deployment, even though he was the team's leading scorer, right? So learning to kind of pace himself a little bit more in future is really going to help him, I think. But he brings standout off puck movement in the offensive zone. He's constantly finding gaps in coverage, really good shot as well. And he's physically gritty and on the forecheck and stuff. So I think that you have a combination of tools there where you can see a pretty clear picture of how the player with these strengths could make it work in the NHL someday. But because he is a few years behind the curve, even though he is an overager who was drafted, and you're probably talking like a 5-year development track before he's even like touching a spot out of training camp.
So I noticed a trend there, Sebastian, all 2025 draft picks. So
yes,
clearly that was a good draft for the Ottawa Senators in your mind. Final question for me is, you kind of labeled the Sens prospect pool as physical and pacey. So when you look at this pool as a whole, what's an area or tool or attribute that is clearly lacking in the Senators prospect pool?
Dynamism, right? Like you have Yakimchuk with that, and I think after that, like with Hensler, you have flashes of dynamism, but you're trying to refine that into something that is able to come out consistently. But otherwise, there's no forward that can break open a game here in terms of like NHL projection. Of course, most of like the young forwards in Ottawa's system are already with the Senators in the lineup, right? Like players like Tim Stützle, and I mean Brady isn't that young anymore, but you know what I mean. Like you got your young guns already, and just like your young core, your sub like under 26 core is just already in the NHL at forward. I think adding a little bit more depth there, just so that you can maybe bank on having some of that potentially game-breaking talent being able to be added into your lineup in the coming seasons, rather than it having to be maybe a trade to go acquire something. I think it would be good to target a potential game-breaking forward in the first round next year, rather than going defense. But still, I think that perhaps overall the lacking here is the overall like high-end upside in this pool. It's why that they're ranked 23rd league-wide. It's that you have Hensler, you have Yakimchuk, and Marilyn, and I'll throw in there as well. And after that, you have a lot of guys that are probably going to be like bottom 6, bottom pair projections, backup starter kind of thing. So I think that because that cutoff is quite high up the board, it's that like right underneath like the 2 or 3 mark, that's probably where the Sens dropped overall in our rankings, but still really happy with the talent that they were able to add in to the pool. this season. And I also think an exciting thing for Sens fans is that there's a lot of turnover in terms of the most interesting depth prospects in this pool this year, right? A lot of guys have been traded, right? A lot of moves have been made, and a lot of new players have been acquired. That like the back half of the board is almost like a 60% turnover from last season, from what we were ranking. So a lot of changes there. You got a lot of fresh blood coming in, and I also think that, as you mentioned, with that pace and with that physicality, you have a pretty clear identity that kind of flows through all of these players, except for Isayev, because I still don't understand that draft pick.
No, it's hilarious. I mean, to take a player out of Russia for the first time since 2008 or 2007, I think it was. I know they took Igor, but honorary Maritimer out of the queue. They hadn't actually drafted out of Russia in so long. For it to be a 5'9" winger, hilarious. And then they went back to Russia for a goalie in the 7th round as well with Andrei Trofimov. And everyone can read and go through this article in its entirety. We're going to link it on YouTube as well, so you can click through there. It's unreal the work that Elite Prospects puts in, Sebastian, and we can tell just based on your wealth of knowledge there. And just to wrap up on a positive, 2 of them actually. First, the Senators prospect pool moved up 2 rankings. They were 25th on Elite Prospects list last year. And then let's leave off with the under 26 core that's in the NHL right now for Ottawa. Brady Tkachuk, Fabian Zetterlund, Shane Pinto, Dylan Cousins, Jordan Spence, Tim Stützle, Ridley Gregg, Jake Sanderson, and Tyler Clevin. So it's not all dark, despite the prospect pool maybe not being what it once was after that 2020 draft. Sebastian, always love your work, man. We appreciate you. Love what you do over at Locked On NHL Prospects as well. People can go see you there for more. Officially friend of the show, 3-time recurring guest. Thanks for doing this, man. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Stick taps to Sebastian for joining us. Fun conversation with him. We'll get to our organizational value rankings in a minute, but Pilsy, what's going on at FanDuel these days?
Well, FanDuel is heating up right now because the NFL season is almost here. Tomorrow is the first game, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers, you can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is my go-to sportsbook, obviously. It's got the best bets, player props, same game parlays, or you can jump into a game live and get your bets in. Every game is more exciting, whether you're just watching your team or you're keeping an eye out for your fantasy lineups. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. Check out that no-brainer 10,000% boost bet I was telling you about last episode. You got to get in on that, and it's only at FanDuel. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
All right, Pilsy, right back to our organizational value rankings. For those who missed it on Monday, we counted down all the way from 65 to 59, and we're going to start today in the same tier. We're calling this the Prospects tier with number 58, and maybe the most shocking pick in the NHL draft this year for any team is the Ottawa Senators drafting out of Russia to take a 5'9" dynamic scoring forward. His name is Dmitry Isayev, and he's 148 pounds as we chat today.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, I know I joked about how it would have been crazy to learn that the Sens drafted a Russian goalie, but Isayev, this is off the charts. So as soon as they drafted him, I Googled him. I had to make sure I got the right guy and that the Sens did, in fact, draft this guy, 5'9", 148, like you mentioned. He's a classic Russian sniper, right shot, plays on the left wing, though. And he put those skills to work in the MHL with, oh boy, here we go, Avto Yekaterinburg.
Yeah, 5th largest city in Russia. You know how I know that?
Google.
Hometown of Igor Sokolov.
Oh, nice. In 44 games there, 22 goals, 23 assists, good for 45 points. So a point per game pace, plus 13, 30 PIMs. It's going to be fascinating to watch this guy's career, Ross. It seems like he's just going to be running it back with the same team in the MHL this year. It'll be interesting to see if he gets a little bit more of a taste in the VHL. He did have one game there last year and 3 in the KHL, but I mean, how many shifts and how many minutes is he playing in those? That's probably not that much. So I think you'd like to see him split the season between the MHL and VHL a little bit more is probably what we're looking for.
But you know what's pretty cool? There's an article at the KHL website, translated to English, thankfully, that I got into, and Yekaterinburg is synonymous with an NHL legend, and that's Pavel Datsyuk, who's been helping the young players in the MHL. So Isayev's been talking about just picking Datsyuk's brain, watching him on the ice in practice, saying that he could still play at the NHL level, one of the silkiest players in National Hockey League history. So for him to be able to learn from such a legend, I think that can only help his development down there as well. And when it comes to Russians too, you hold their rights forever. So I don't think that Sens fans should start thinking about what a life could look like with Dmitry Isayev in the lineup in the organization, but he's certainly got to keep an eye on as the numbers keep jumping off the page. This is his first year on the organizational value rankings. He comes in at 58th overall after being the 5th round pick, 149th overall in the 2025 NHL draft. What would you like to see out of Isayev this season? Just play more pro games?
Yeah, get a better split. Ross, are we referring to Isayev as a mythical creature? Is that more for bigger creatures?
Yeah, I think we'd have to find a new term for Isayev, but if he keeps lighting it up, he's going to catch our attention.
Absolutely, yep.
And that's why he comes in at number 58 on our organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 57, very, very fun conversation we had with this gentleman earlier on in July. Jackson Parsons, hashtag goalie friendly show. How about goalie of the year in the Canadian Hockey League last year with the Kitchener Rangers, where he had a 37-12-3 record, 5 shutouts, and a sparkling .920 save percentage. He's making his debut on our list after being an undrafted free agent signing around at Dev Camp, I should say, and just good organizational depth. Pillsy, you want winners in your organization, and I know that they couldn't get past the London Knights, but the Kitchener Rangers still had a hell of a year.
Yeah, exactly. And Ross, not only do you want that type of talent in your organization, but you want guys who want to be here. Jackson Parsons told us that he chose to go to Ottawa Development Camp, and it was a clear, easy choice for him as a guy that clearly is done with the OHL. He dominated last year, like we talked about, and he's likely going to spend time with the Allen Americans, the reunited, I was about to say newly joined, but that's not true. The reunited ECHL team, the Allen Americans in Texas. So I wonder, Ross, if the amount of extra defensemen and having a guy like Jackson Parsons in the system really pushed the Ottawa Senators to get an ECHL team affiliate so that they could have a spot for these guys, and that's still kind of in their control. So I think he's going to see a good amount of games down there.
Yeah, I think for me, the goal for him is to play maybe 4, 5, 6 AHL games and show well in those, and then just continue to develop his game in the pro level. And we talked to him about all the other goalies that have taken the path through the ECHL, and it's a lot easier to see the big picture, I think, from the crease rather than if you're a player, skater who's been reassigned. It just feels so far away from the National Hockey League.
And just one quick thing, I think it's good for goalies to go to the ECHL because everyone we've talked to that's done that route, they mentioned how there's a lot less structure in the ECHL. So you can't depend on your defense partners to always be in the right spot at the right time and make responsible plays. You got to be accountable for yourself a little bit more down there. And I think that's a good tool in young goalies' development path.
Jackson Parsons makes his debut at 57 on our organizational value rankings, which brings us to number 56, Eric with 2 E's, Wallenius, another big left shot defenseman. You heard that before when talking about Senators organizational depth? Well, he's 6'4", 217 pounds, and I'm very happy to see that he's coming over to the CHL. He's going to play in Moncton with the Wildcats this upcoming season. They're supposed to be a good team as well, and it'll be nice because he did very well in the U20 circuit in Finland, but hasn't really been able to establish a spot in Liga.
Yeah, let's start with his U20 numbers. In 39 games 4 goals, 18 assists, finished as a -9, 81 PIMs. And then he did get 5 Liga games, but zeros all across the board there. So I think this is the type of move, Ross, where he probably knows where he stands with his organization in Finland, HPK, and maybe was seeing the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to get the opportunities he was hoping for. And if you're hoping for a career in North America, it makes sense that at this time in his development that he's deciding to come over here. And the Moncton Wildcats, they got a good program there. I think that's one of the Q teams that a lot of
imports,
yes, thank you, choose to go to because of the way they're able to kind of
Gardner McDougall's their head coach, and he's a legend in the university ranks first and foremost. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he is going to be, as I tap dance around here, yes, he will be the head. No, it's the Hunters. Was he on the bench last year? No, but anyways, he's the Quebec League champion, Canadian Hockey League Coach of the Year this season. And his numbers at the University of New Brunswick are ridiculous. He's a 7-time champion down there. So
decent.
Yeah, decent. So now he runs the program out with the Moncton Wildcats. So looking forward to seeing what Eric Wallenius can do. And he is an assistant coach on the World Junior squad. I knew that he's also got an all-time mustache. Have you seen this guy?
No, I'm not familiar with this mustache.
I ran into him in Vegas right after we said goodbye after the NHL draft. And for those curious, like, that's an all-time mustache if you're watching.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Gardner McDougall. So as we were saying, expect Eric Wallenius to get some good development down there. I think this is going to be good for him.
Yep, agreed.
2024 5th round pick comes in at number 56 on our organizational value rankings, and that is a slight bump up from where he was last year. He's up 4 spots from number 60. All right, coming in at number 55, it's Matthew Andonovski. Bit of a market correction for him. When he came on the list for the first time, 5th round pick in 2023, he was 57th overall, then jumped all the way up to 35th. And now he's back at 55. I think we got a little too excited because the offensive numbers started to pop and then came back down a little bit this year. But he did take on a leadership role as the captain in Kitchener.
Yeah, well, the reason we had him so high, Ross, is he had an incredible year. And it really looked like he was going to build on that. No, I'm not saying he didn't build on that, but I think the expectations were higher than what he achieved this year. But in 65 games, he had 6 goals, 15 assists, 21 points, a +10, which is a big drop from +58 the season before where he led the OHL. And this guy racks up PIMs, 132 PIMs this season. And then in 16 playoff games, he had 4 assists, a +8. I think the question with Matthew Andonovski is, where is he going to play this year, Ross? You and I kind of went back and forth whether we think he's going to go back to the OHL, do one final year. And as a captain of a good team and a good program in the Kitchener Rangers, I don't think it would be that crazy for him to go back. But again, this is a guy that would make a lot of sense to go to the ECHL. Like Thomas Hamara was a guy that had to go back to the OHL last year because there just wasn't a spot for him in Belleville. And I guess they weren't comfortable putting him in Orlando. So now that they have an affiliate team, I think a guy like Matthew Andonovski, who plays a smart, responsible game and has good size, he could handle it down there.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating too, because if he has a better camp than Tomas Hamara, there could be a spot for him in Belleville, like the left side of the defense. Right now it's Sabrango, Jorian Donovan, Tomas Hamara, and Matthew Andonovski. So we'll see how things shake out down there. And could they have a righty play the left side? Maybe, because they are deep on the right side with Cam Crotty and Lassie Thompson coming in, already having Max Gannett, who again needs a contract, Jabril Toure on the right side. So there's a lot of young pieces on the back end. He'll have to fight for every inch. He actually led the OHL in penalty minutes this past season.
More than Gabe?
Yeah, Gabe was 5th on the list.
Wow.
Andonovski played 2 extra games and actually had 16 more penalty minutes than Eliasson. So he's racking up the penalty minutes, but he's a big boy, plays physical, plays mean, and you're hoping that one day he's going to be a low event NHL defenseman, likely on the bottom pair, who can help you in the trenches throughout the game. 6'3", 215 pounds, still has 3 years left on his entry-level contract at $836,000. The graph obviously looks more pronounced because of that bump up in 2024, but still a nice fifth-round pick from 2023, 140th overall. Matthew Andonovski comes in at number 55 on our organizational value rankings. To number 54, we go to Theo Wahlberg, and slight drop, 12 spots from last year where he was 42nd. And that, again, is the anomaly because he was 56th in 2023, he's 59th in 2022. He's got the tools, 6'5", over 200 pounds. He's 21 years old. And after 3 seasons now with the Ohio State Buckeyes, he's going to transfer to Western Michigan, the reigning champ. So again, a guy who's going to a good program. Now it's about, will he get the minutes there?
Yeah, and that's funny, Ross, because initially I thought, a change from Ohio State is probably going to be a downgrade. But this is not the case here. And not probably the season Theo Wahlberg wanted after a really good rookie year.
Freshman. I think I said third year. I meant to say he's going into his third year of college. He spent 2 years with Ohio State, and now he's going to Western Michigan.
Correct. Yeah. In his first year with Ohio State, in 38 games, he had 21 points. And then this year in 27 games, just the 8 assists, no goals. But did go from a -10 to a +13. So that cleaned up there, whether that was just overall team play or him developing, not sure. But he's got potential, and he was able to put up points in the J20 league in Sweden back in his home country. And he also spent a year in the USHL. So he's been moved around and he's got different opportunities. So we'll see how this year goes for him. But I think he's one of those guys, Ross, that often Sens fans forget about. And I think if he can have a nice college career, there's no reason why he couldn't be a serviceable guy in Belleville in next couple of years.
Has been in the organization now since the 2022 draft when he was the 168th overall pick. And I think we're going to have to see a bit more offense at the college level this year for him to earn that contract. The Sens do hold his rights until the following summer of 2027. So Theo Wahlberg comes in at number 54 on our organizational value rankings. We still have more in this final prospect tier. There's 8 tiers overall, and we've got all the way up to 54. So if you're watching on YouTube, again, bit of a Easter egg because we do have the team logos of everybody as we continue counting our way to the franchise tier. And the ordering of that tier will be fascinating. We feel good about it 1 minute, and then we question it the next. We're going to have to make a very, very tough decision at the top of this board, but we're working our way through the prospects right now, and we'll get to more of them this Friday.
Yeah, I'm excited to keep going down this list, Ross, especially once we get to the next tier. This is a lot of these guys are just, hey, this is this guy. This is how much he weighs, how tall he is, and where he played last year.
Are they trending up or down? I like looking at that too. Like the lowest player who had an NHL game last season is at 41st. So we're still a ways away from that. This is a lot of the prospects who are still unsigned and playing either junior, Europe, college, whatever the case may be. But there's definitely some guys to keep an eye on in what we're doing on Friday, especially one in particular. And I'll tell you who that is on Friday. Pills, any final thoughts on today's show?
Final thoughts for me is next week, we're back to 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. Thank you to everyone for sticking through us while we get a bit of a break, 3 shows instead of 5 for a month and a half or so. That's our off season. And we do
How many shows did we do last week?
Well, yeah, we did 4 last week, so it's hard to keep us down, but we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. It's full force ahead as we get closer to the preseason and to the regular season. So for everyone that's builds their routine around listening to the podcast, well, you can yes, thank you. You can keep that routine. Walk the dog same time every day on your commute to and from work or school. We got you guys.
And there are still a couple of opportunities For advertising, you can reach out to the email associated with us on YouTube or on social media at Sens Central, LockedOn.Senators. Love our great partners, farmtoforkdelivery.ca, GLEBE Central Pub, FanDuel, Gametime, Monarch Money. Shout out to everybody who helps this show tick, but it all comes down to the fact that you citizens and everydayers love the Ottawa Senators, and so do we. Those jerseys will be flying around the ice in 2 weekends at the rookie tournament at the Bell Center. Even though they're not playing Montreal, we got a lot of comments on that. Yeah, that is very weird. Who would have thought to see a Battle of Ontario at the Bell Center? We're going to get that in the rookie tournament.
Hey, there's been some funny business in rookie tournament games between Ottawa and Montreal in the past, so I think it's smart to avoid it.
Yeah, so Sens will play the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets in the rookie tournament, but no preseason game in Winnipeg. I think I'm like tough. One of 6 people who are upset by that.
Yeah, I think hopefully, Ross, you can voice your frustration and they'll be back there next year.
Yes, we need that. We'll be back here on Friday. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.